The other factor that's influencing the trend in life expectancy is what's happening with drug overdoses and particularly the opioid crisis.
Welcome back to Closer Look across the Village Media Network and available wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can follow us all over social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and our brand new website, closerlookpodcast.ca. With Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Was very saddened to see on Sunday morning the passing of Beverly Thompson, the former co-host of Canada AM on CTV.
Yeah, great journalist, someone who's been was around our industry for a long time and very well respected. I only met Beverly once. I did one appearance on Canada AM.
Tell us about that.
Many, many years ago. I don't even remember the year. I wrote a book 50 years ago, and they
look good.
Yeah, thank you. I was I did a promo for the book. They talked to me about the book, and Seamus O'Regan interviewed me if I remember right. But Beverly was the co-host, and it was quite an operation. The old Canada AM, and it was such a staple of morning television, right? I mean, everybody watched Canada AM. Especially from a certain generation, they all watched it, and so she was certainly very well known. And she, as her colleagues said after she passed, she was very, brave and tough in her fight against cancer. Her thing was, let's keep going and keep doing the show. It was pretty inspiring. 61
years of age, Beverly Thompson passing away Sunday, and you're right, that show in its heyday with Bev Thompson, Seamus O'Regan, Marcy Ian, and Jeff Hutchison. Yes. It was a great watch every morning.
Do you remember too when they canceled it? It was just like all of a sudden Canada AM was going off the air. And it was like felt like fake news. It wasn't real. And to be honest, I don't even know what's on CTV News.
I couldn't tell you.
It's not Canada AM for sure.
I do know that we are on every Monday through Friday at 7:00.
Yes, Canada PM.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Damn right. Canada. We could have called the show that. Canada PM.
We should have.
Or Ontario PM. Okay, tonight on Closer Look.
We're dead to remember what it was called.
That's right. We're talking numbers.
Yes, talking demographics, talking aging population. Doug Norris is a great guy. People might recognize Doug. He was forever at Statistics Canada for many decades, became known as Mr. Census. He did a lot of media. Whenever there was new news about the population in Canada or other demographic news, he was usually on TV talking about it. And Doug has since retired from Statistics Canada, but is still working hard in the industry, and he's going to come on and talk to us about the newest life expectancy numbers, the sort of what everyone knows is coming, this big rise in the aging population in Canada, and just some other things, in particular sort of the age of data that we live in and whether people believe in the kind of data that he would have spent his career looking at. We live in a world now where people just don't trust anything, even the most basic reputable fact people don't trust anymore. So it'd be great to have him on. He's going to come on and chat about all those things with us right now.
Very pleased to be joined tonight by Doug Norris, one of the country's leading experts on demographics. Doug spent nearly 30 years with Statistics Canada, where he earned the nickname Mr. Census and is now Senior Vice President and Chief Demographer at Environics Analytics. Doug, if we can, I'd like to start with the news of the week, which is that life expectancy has increased this year for the first time since the start of the pandemic. Now, that seems to make sense considering how many lives were cut short during the COVID crisis. What do you make of the latest data?
Well, certainly, I think with the COVID hit, we did see life expectancy dropping, probably for the first time ever. It had been increasing for a very long time. The number of deaths immediately after COVID was quite high. And so life expectancy dropped, but there continued to be deaths for the next couple of years, and probably there's still some. But the other factor that's influencing the trend in life expectancy is what's happening with drug overdoses and particularly the opioid crisis. That started being reflected in the numbers of deaths back around 2015. And has picked up speed ever since. And so that just combined with the COVID deaths really dropped down the life expectancy that we see. It did come back a little bit, and I expect we'll see it come back a little bit more when we get the data for the most recent year. And I think continue on with increases, but probably not the increases that we saw in the past. I think the increases will be at a bit of a slower pace.
I want to talk about those overall increases, but just to pause for a second, that really hits home for me, the fact that the opioid crisis is so bad in this country, has been so devastating, it's actually impacted the life expectancy.
I did. I mean, that combined with the COVID, but even alone, if you go back and look at life expectancy around 2015, you can see the slowdown. Still increased year over year, but at a slower rate. And a large part of that was, I think, the opiate crisis.
That's unbelievable. Doug, you mentioned the longer term trends, like say starting back into 1980, for example, where the life expectancy kind of grew steadily between 1980 and 2020 from about 75 years to about 82 years old. And then it did kind of flatline, like you said, probably because of the pandemic, because of the opioid crisis. And like you said, that's not just COVID, it is the opioid crisis. Do you expect that that flatline will continue for a long time?
Well, I think we're going to see it start to pick up a little bit, but the increases that we'll likely see year over year going forward are probably lower than what we saw in the pre-COVID period. So I think we'll be on the increasing trend again, but maybe at a bit of a slower rate.
What are some of the reasons for that, do you think? What would be some of the reasons where you've kind of had this steady rise and it's going to kind of stay like this?
Well, we're still going to have at least, hopefully for not too much longer, but I think for a couple of years, that impact of the opioid crisis, which pulls it down a little bit. There may be other factors at play too. We know obesity levels are going up. That may start to slow down the health of many people and pull down a little bit on life expectancy. And maybe in the long run, some of the advances that we saw in heart disease, cancer, etc., may not be as much in the future as they were in the past. Hard to say.
It's a great
number of factors at play.
Yeah, it's a great point, right, Doug? Because we kind of lived in this age of medical breakthroughs where we saw so many things happening between 19 and 2020 that would help help people live longer, save lives. And we can't really know if we're going to expect those same kind of things over the next 40 years.
That's right. Yeah.
Doug, we now have medically assisted death in Canada, or MAID as it's commonly referred to. Have there been enough medically assisted deaths to impact the average life expectancy?
I haven't seen any studies on that. My own view is that probably it didn't have much of an effect. It may have had a slight effect in holding down the increase, but I don't think it's a big factor yet. As those numbers go up, we may see that as well, hold life expectancy down a little bit. Right. Hard to say, but I don't think it's of the magnitude of what we saw during COVID.
Okay, let's move on to some other recent numbers that are very interesting. Canada's over 85 population is set to triple by the year 2073 to as many as 4.3 million people. Doug, what kind of pressures can that put on the country, especially healthcare, and how do we even begin to prepare for that?
Well, I think that is a major factor that, in my view, may be a bit of a sleeper issue for many. Hasn't received, I think, the attention that we're going to need to pay for it, both in terms of attention and in terms of dollars over the coming years. That 85-year-old population is clearly getting into the ages where health issues of various sorts come into play, even with the longer life expectancy, and we're living healthier in our older years. But inevitably, people get chronic diseases, other kinds of diseases, and need more and more health care. So certainly, and that health care starts to be expensive at those older ages when it needs to be pretty intense. Just the whole issue of caregiving. How are older people, perhaps who aren't as mobile as they used to be, going to get around? What kinds of housing is going to be needed? We hear a lot about the nursing homes, and during COVID, the impact in nursing homes was an abysmal sight, and we need to do more on that. We see more and more people choosing to go into retirement homes, and more people at their older ages, into their 80s, start to decide, well, maybe the old family home is too big now. I'm looking for something smaller. and we see a bit of a shift to rental apartments for that people. So big implications for healthcare, for the costs, for the demand for healthcare workers, and on the housing industry, and just providing services to that older population that maybe can't get out to the grocery store. Perhaps they'll be able to order in, but they're going to demand a different kind of service in their older years.
Dumb question, probably, and an obvious one for someone like you, but what's causing this major increase? It's the baby boomers getting older and just the birth rate is so much lower than it was before?
Well, in terms of numbers, it really is the baby boom, the large numbers of baby boomers that are now hitting 80, I guess, this year or next year. And that's what's giving rise to the large numbers. If you look at the proportion of our population at the older ages, I think if you look at it 65 and over, it's about 20% now. That is affected by not only the large numbers at the older ages, but also the low birth rate, because there's relatively few young people, babies being born now in Canada. Our birth rate is, I think, the lowest we've ever seen. So that affects the proportion of the population at the older ages, but the numbers are a direct reflect of the boomers.
Doug, many people want to age at home. So what would need to change to make that a reality for more Canadians?
Well, I think you're certainly right. Any surveys that I've seen and that are done show that people want to age at home. Perhaps they don't want to age in the big family home they lived in and brought up their kids in, but they want to age in the community where they have likely facilities they know, they have neighbors they know, and they want to stay in that environment. So that's where I think different kinds of housing are needed. We often see many of the older people living in suburban areas. There's not much alternative for them. The lot of resistance to building smaller houses or even apartments in some of those suburban areas. And they're needed by that older population. Certainly developing at-home healthcare services, visiting nurses who might come in or other healthcare professionals that can come in perhaps once a day, perhaps several times a week to provide the kinds of services. And in terms of other amenities people need, clearly, I think we're fortunate now in that there is a lot of deliveries. People can order online. And things like that. So we need a number of changes to allow people to live in the community. And that would be a big cost saver because terribly expensive. And not only is it not desirable for many older people to go into nursing homes, it's expensive.
Absolutely.
And if you just think of the number of new nursing homes we need, if current trends continue, it's amazing.
It is fascinating. We're starting to see more and more stories about, say, multi-generational homes where people are living with their elderly parents in their house. We're even seeing kind of the Golden Girl model where people are that they have this big home that their maybe partner has passed away, so they're inviting friends to live there with them. Are you seeing more of that, Doug?
There is that, and we're starting to see that, and we're starting to see even apartments. A lot of apartments tend to have a lot of seniors in them. And so we're starting to see seniors come together and develop the kind of facility that allow them to get care in that. Even if it's not an organized retirement home, they come together and provide for themselves in various ways. And certainly the multifamily homes in some cases, not large numbers yet, but we may see more of that. Again, a lot of this is a function of the types of housing that are available to allow people to do what they want to do. As you well know, the housing availability hasn't been great in the past. We hear a lot of talk today, but one of the needs, and certainly young people are in need of housing, and affordability is a major issue, but also for seniors, the kinds of housing that allow seniors to live in the community. I think we need to pay a little more attention to that.
That's a great transition to my next question. I don't know if it's fair, but I was going to ask you to weigh in on Prime Minister Carney's announcement yesterday about the new federal agency that's going to oversee the construction of thousands of affordable homes. Did you follow that closely? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not any expert in the housing industry, but certainly I think anything that we can do or start to do in terms of approving better housing for both young people and older people. And again, it's a lot to do with the types of housing are needed. But as many would say, the proof is in the pudding, and we'll have to see how that works out.
Looking ahead 50 years or so, Doug, we talk about, obviously affordable housing being a challenge. What are some of the other big challenges you see for Canada's aging population and maybe some of the opportunities?
Well, certainly the whole healthcare issue that we touched on when we talked about our older population is going to be a major issue over the next certainly 20 or 30 years because of the sheer numbers and the needs and the different needs those people will have. But after that, the sort of numbers of seniors starts to level off, and that once that big baby boomers pass, it's a much more stable progression of size of different generations from one to the other. And I think that may be better. In the short term, I think there is a concern for what's happening with the labor market and with employment. Shortages, particularly in some occupations, may be a factor. And we continue to evolve into an older community, but that'll stabilize. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be a much more multicultural society, inevitably, because all of our growth going forward is going to come basically from immigrants or the children of immigrants. So the face of particularly our large urban areas is going to continue to change. It's changed a lot, certainly in the largest areas, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. But it's going to change a lot more, even in those medium-sized urban areas as well. Mm-hmm. And that'll mean various kinds of changes.
Mm-hmm. You're perfectly transitioning to all my questions, Doug, so thank you for that. You talked about the labor market. Immigration is going to play such a critical role in the coming decades. If you were in charge of the immigration ministry right now, what would be your key priorities? How would you make sure that Canada is getting the kind of immigration numbers that we need, and then to fill the labor gaps that we have? Yeah,
it's certainly a complicated issue, and the government let it get away from it over the past couple of years. Absolutely. In over a 2-year period, we welcomed about 2.5 million people into Canada. That was the population of Manitoba and Saskatchewan combined. And clearly that's not sustainable. That has a major impact on housing, on healthcare services, social services. And the government finally recognized that and started bringing down those numbers. And we are seeing the numbers come down. Mm-hmm. Lots of debate about are they coming down enough or not. The other side of it is immigrants play an important role, have always played an important role in Canada, both highly skilled immigrants and some of the immigrants working in the agriculture area, for example, which I think many would argue aren't the kinds of jobs that many Canadians want to do. Mm-hmm. So there's a balancing act, I think, between developing an immigration policy that, and I think that is fair to those people coming into Canada. I think, unfortunately, in the last 3 or 4 years, with all those international students and temporary workers came to Canada, and I think they had hopes of staying.
Yes.
And now they're not able to stay. Their visas, their temporary permits are going to expire. They're going to be expected to leave. And that's really hard on them. And some of them may have families here. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to recognize what we do when we bring in temporary workers. My own view a little bit is if a person is good enough to come here and work temporarily, they probably are good enough to stay in the long term. And we need to pay more attention perhaps to that transition from bringing people in, perhaps studying, getting Canadian experience, and then qualifying for permanent residency.
It's definitely a discussion that's going on across the country. Now people are wondering the same things you just mentioned. It is that time of year, I believe, when the federal government does release their annual immigration targets. I believe it's in the fall. What do you expect? Right. Yeah, what do you expect it to be at this year? That's for non-permanent or for permanent residents, right? Correct, Doug?
Yeah. Well, they've also now got some targets. They're harder to sort of decipher for the temporary, but the permanent residents have been targeted now for a number of years, generally every 3 years. So right now, up until the change, we were heading for 500,000 permanent residents this year. The government brought that down, and now the target is 395,000, dropping a little bit more to 365,000 over 2 years, the next 2 years. don't say anything about what happens beyond that.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, when the government tables its report to Parliament, generally first week in November, they will reset those next 3 years. So they may bring down those numbers a little bit. My own guess is I don't know that they'll bring them down too much more. And I'm not clear what they'll say beyond that 3 years, whether they're looking to increase them back up a little bit or hold them constant at that. So I don't expect, despite all of the talk, a lot of change. Because we need those immigrants in the labor market, and we need, if we had no immigration, the country would decline in population over the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's a real balancing act I think the government has, and hopefully we can develop our services and our housing and our health services to be able to provide to not only Canadians that are here, but to those immigrants who arrive here.
Mm-hmm. I find this a fascinating conversation, Doug, just because you yourself have been someone who's been looking at these numbers for decades, right? You've followed this closely. You're a leading expert on this topic. And I want to ask you, because I've asked this of other people as well, we kind of living in an age that's more and more, people aren't believing the data they see anymore. They question everything. The idea of facts are slowly going out the window, right? I'm sure you've seen this as well too. Have you noticed that in your world? And does it worry you that there might come a time where people might say, yeah, but I don't believe what the data from Statistics Canada says, because why would they? And whereas 20 years ago, no one would question that it was true.
No, that's true, and certainly we see that much more in the U.S. when the president doesn't like the numbers, fire the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and get somebody who's going to give him the numbers he wants.
That's right.
I don't think. Well, we certainly haven't seen that in Canada. Collecting data today is much more difficult than it was in the past because it depends on people's cooperation. In the kinds of numbers that I'm talking about, the basic demographic trends, I haven't had a lot of questioning of the numbers yet, but it is a concern as people just point to the fact, especially with social media, that those numbers aren't right if they don't conform to what they'd like to see.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The one area where there is more debate is this whole issue of what happens to the temporary residents whose permits expire. If their permit expires, they're expected to leave Canada. Well, we have no way of checking how many people leave Canada.
That's right.
And so there is some questioning of, well, how many people are living here as undocumented residents? And we don't know. We don't have those numbers. With the big increase or the big decrease that the government announced, it means many more people have to leave. And I think we may start to see some debate about, well, are those StatsCan population numbers really right?
Yes.
Do they know how many people left?
Yes.
They make some assumptions about how many are leaving, but their assumptions are basically based on expired permits. So they're expecting those with expired permits to leave. I think they build in some kind of delay. They may do a little bit of adjustment, but it's heavily based on an expired permit. They have no direct evidence. They may be looking at new kinds of data to see if people are leaving. So that's one area where there may be a bit of skepticism. Do we really have more people than we think?
That's right, because there's no data to show it, right? Because there's no way to track people's exit from the country, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. That's a fascinating point. I appreciate that.
Doug, we could sit here and talk numbers all day. Goodness knows Frisco and I love to do that. Is there anything that we didn't touch on today that you wanted to cover?
Perhaps just to tie some of the thoughts we talked about together, with those low numbers of immigrants coming in and the cutback in the non-permanent residents, we're going to see the country, perhaps even according to StatsCan, decline in population just a little bit over the next couple of years. In the first quarter of this year, for example, there was a very slight increase, and three of the big provinces, Quebec, Ontario, and BC, actually recorded an actual drop in their total population.
Fascinating.
And that's probably, we're going to get data from the second quarter, I think, in another week or so. my guess is we may see slight declines, not large declines, but slight declines for a number of years, and likely declines in the big cities of Toronto and Vancouver, where there are high numbers of those non-permanent residents whose permits will expire.
Interesting. We'll have to keep in touch with you. We'll have to get you back on, Doug, to talk about that.
For sure. There he is, Mr. Census, Doug Norris, the Senior VP and Chief Demographer at Environics Analytics. Doug, good to see you. We appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, great talking with you.
Great conversation about numbers. Speaking of numbers, in regards to U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, the page views and comments on that one, kaboom, exploded.
That was a great episode, and hopefully people had a chance to watch it. We reran some snippets of it in yesterday's closer look. It was a great conversation just from the perspective of a Trump administration official, someone who's close to the president, talking about his view of Canada. It was an interesting conversation for me because he said all the right things, and I think was very genuine, being from Michigan, right? Understanding the relationship and the bond between Canada and the United States. Yeah. And I think he was very clear in pointing out that he doesn't think the way Trump thinks about these 51st state musings.
No,
he repeatedly called us a sovereign state, and that's our decision. So that was very respectful. But, in reality, and it's not being critical of him, it's just this is the reality, is that there's no sympathy there for the Canadian industries that may be hurting by this sudden change in tariff policy from the United States after decades of having a different agreement in place. Obviously, that was clear. And this idea to, watching it again, he repeatedly kept reminding us that we have the best deal out there, that you're so lucky to have the best trade deal of anyone else in the world. Basically, you should be grateful for it. And this other undertone of, we want to make sure that we're prosperous, because if America's prosperous, it's good for you. Right? It's basically saying, hey, little brother, if we do well, then you're going to do well. But it was a great conversation.
It was interesting to read some of the comments where people were saying, okay, if we have the best deal, how bad are the other ones?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, if ours is the best.
I especially like the comments that we should be booted out of Canada for daring to have Pete Hoekstra on the show.
For those of you who don't know, we've been abolished to America.
Which is pretty funny.
We'll be leaving at the end of the week.
But you know what? I hope people watch it and see that it was an open conversation. Yeah. I mean, sure, there's 1,000 more questions we could have had. People. We didn't have him on the show for 6 hours. No. We had some time with him. We were happy to have that time. And this is what the Trump administration is thinking. It's no surprise what they're thinking, and I think what he said was a lot of things weren't surprising at all. It was interesting to hear him talk about his interactions with Doug Ford and how Doug Ford definitely does not think like the Trump administration. No. So interesting. Hopefully some more comes out of that.
For sure. And later on this week, we should mention we'll be speaking with the mayor of Barrie, Mayor Nuttall, about the encampment situation.
Yes, the declaration of the state of emergency in Barrie. A lot of communities around the province are watching because homeless encampments have become an issue in most communities across Ontario that are struggling with this. Mayor Alex Nuttall put out a declared state of emergency in Barrie. What that means, we're going to get into in the conversation. The idea that it gives them more resources, they say, to help more people, to get them out to tear down these encampments. And we're already seeing that. Our talented team at Barrie Today has been covering this every day. The encampments coming down and different people expressing their opinions on this. I think Mayor Nuttall, we're going to ask him this. I'm sure he knows everybody around the province is watching what happens in Barrie, and we're interested to see how he thinks it's going and what the long-term goal is.
And I think we're going to do that Thursday.
That should be Thursday night's show.
Thursday night at 7 o'clock. Okay, that's it for us. Remember, you can follow us on social media. Check out our brand new website, closerlookpodcast.ca, or find us on YouTube at Closer Look Podcast. For Michael Friscolanti, our editor-in-chief here at Village Media, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Enjoy what's left of your Tuesday evening. We'll see you tomorrow night right here, 7 o'clock on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.